Thank you very much, Erskine and Alan, not only for being here today, but for your incredible leadership on this incredibly important issue. And thank you to all of you for being here as well. I want to join with our chairman of the commission, as well as the other senators who supported it, and Tom Coburn, in delivering the important message of the day. And if there's really one message that I would hope everyone will leave here with today, it is that the time for gridlock is over. We do not have time to continue to go around the bush and around the bush and around the bush, debating and fighting about our specific, perfect solutions. As has been said by everyone who's spoken today, there was a lot in this plan that was hard to swallow for every single member of the commission who voted for it. But there was much more in this plan that was hard to leave behind. In fact, I think it was Kent Conrad who said the only thing worse than voting in favor of this plan is voting against this plan. Many of the economists who addressed us as we were deliberating as a commission said probably the most important thing this commission could do would be to come forward with a plan that could get the Congress and the American people behind it. Because if we will simply, as a nation, adopt a plan that is long-term in focus and can get us on the pathway toward dealing with our debt crisis, it would have a bigger impact on our economy than maybe any specific element or the plan in itself in its entirety. I have to admit that I, among many, when the commission began, was somewhat dubious. And then when I was asked to be a member of it, I was even more dubious about just whether this really had merit and where it would end up. But as we deliberated, it became evident to me that this is one of those times in our history when Americans have to come together and we have to set aside partisan differences and other differences and agree to solve a critical national solution. When the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff can say that the greatest threat to our national security is our national debt, we need to pay attention. I'm not going to give you a lot of statistics. I think you've got folks who are going to be here to lay out the specific details of why we are saying this. But we are not facing a long fuse on this issue. It's been very common for people in the political arena to say, you know, if we don't stop spending so much and if we don't stop driving up our debt, then our children and our grandchildren are going to pay the price. It's not our children and our grandchildren only who will deal with this issue. It is every one of us in this room. It's everyone in America today. We are talking about a matter of a short few years at best if we don't stop our current direction and our current policy in this country, that we will face a debt crisis. And I think Dave Cody may talk to you about a little more about that, and probably a number of the others here. And so quickly in summary, what did the commission do that caused me to go from being dubious to a supporter? First of all, it brought together a consensus that we must act and we must act now. And it developed the groundwork and the framework for justifying that claim. Secondly, it was comprehensive. We looked at everything. Everything has to be on the table. There cannot be any more portions of the solution that are simply set aside as being too important or too critical to be a part of it. We looked at spending. We divided it into discretionary and entitlement spending. And there are solutions in the plan to deal with each. We looked at tax policy, and I thought wonderfully, instead of getting into the age-old debate over whether we should raise taxes or lower taxes, we talked about the fact that our tax code could not probably be made much less fair, more complex, more expensive to comply with, and more competitive to our international circumstances, or more anti-competitive with regard to our posture in the world. And we looked at reforming the tax code to make it more fair, more efficient, less expensive to comply with, and most importantly, to make America more competitive globally and generate the kind of dynamic response in our economy that will generate a stronger revenue response to help us achieve a solution on the revenue side of the equation. We looked at process, because everybody knows that if you set out a plan to move forward, members of Congress are going to try to get around it. Some of the best tricks we have today are to declare something a national emergency and we don't even have to count it. There are other parts of the situation, of the budget process in Congress that we need to deal with. But we focused on closing the process loopholes and creating process strengths to assure the world that if we adopt this plan, we will stick with it. And what does it do in the end? In addition to dealing with spending, with revenue policy, and with process, it takes the curve that, if you haven't read the report, is in the very first chart in the report, and which shows an exploding national debt that will drive us into economic disaster, and it bends it down. And it literally takes the delta out of the curve that is going like this and bends it down, ultimately to a balanced budget and to a reduction of our debt problems. That's what we need to come together and achieve it as Americans. Last comment in terms of just some perspective. We're fighting in Congress this week, and in the next 48 hours or so, we will vote on several proposals to cut somewhere between $6 billion and $60 billion worth of spending out of this year's budget. And it's important that we are having that debate, and I hope that we will make major strides in making those kinds of spending reforms. But this plan cuts $4 trillion off of our national debt over the next decade. That is the scope of difference that we need to be thinking about and focusing on as we look at the crisis our nation faces. I just want to conclude by again thanking our chairman, all of the others who will be on the panel today, the other commission members who have been here, and all of you, because it's you who will help us get this message across, and if possible, help us get this solution put into place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Crapo. Thank you, Senator Conrad.